The sound of the front door clicking open jolted me from my half-hearted scrolling through old family photos. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or perhaps my wife, Aisha, returning early from the grocery store. But the distinct creak of the hallway floor beneath someone else's feet made my stomach drop. A strange, familiar scent of expensive cologne lingered in the air. My pulse spiked, froze. My mind raced. Who could possibly be in my house at this hour? Then I heard it, laughter. A low, intimate laugh, one that belonged only to someone who knew Aisha too well. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the couch, trying to steady my thoughts. 20 years. 20 years of marriage, trust and compromise. Years that I had spent believing that Aisha and I were partners in life, that our love had survived every storm. And now, all of it, it seemed, was crumbling in the span of one night. I crept toward the staircase, keeping my breathing shallow, counting each step to avoid making a sound. Through the half-open door of our master bedroom, I saw him, my wife's lover, standing too close. His hand brushing hers as she leaned into him with a familiarity that made my chest tighten painfully. The sight was unbearable, yet I couldn't look away. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered under my breath, but even I knew it was a hollow protest. Aisha looked up, startled, her eyes widening. Then, for a moment, I saw the guilt flash across her face before it was replaced by something colder, calculating. She hadn't expected me to come home this early. I backed into the hallway, my mind working faster than it had in years. Divorce papers flashed in my memory, property agreements, legal consultations. All the measures I'd once dismissed as pessimistic now suddenly seemed like lifelines. I couldn't confront this blindly. I couldn't let 20 years of work, 20 years of shared assets, slip away in a moment of emotional devastation. "Who is he?" I asked finally, my voice tight but steady. Aisha's lips parted, then closed again, as if unsure whether to deny it or confess. The man beside her, arrogant and unashamed, didn't even flinch. He smirked, as though daring me to act. "He's just a friend," she said, her voice almost casual. But the tremor in her hands betrayed her. I felt a wave of nausea. My mind conjured every possible confrontation, every angry word I wanted to throw at her, but I forced myself to stay calm. There was something more important than words right now. Control. Control of the situation, control of the consequences. I stepped back into the hallway, took a deep breath, and called the number I'd saved discreetly on my phone weeks ago. My lawyer. If I acted swiftly, I could protect the assets we had built together. The house, the savings, the investments, all the things that were tangible remnants of a life I had poured myself into. "Sir, how may I help you?" the familiar voice answered. "Emergency," I said, my voice low but urgent. "I need you here. Now." Hanging up, I returned to the staircase, silently observing. Aisha was pacing now, her movements sharp, her words hurriedly forming excuses that didn't fit. The man, still overconfident, didn't seem to notice my presence at all. I felt my chest tighten, a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and disbelief threatening to overwhelm me. Memories of our early days together, the late-night drives, our first home, our wedding vows, flashed in a cruel montage. And yet, the reality before me was undeniable. She had betrayed me. Not a careless misstep, not a momentary lapse, but a full-blown affair under my own roof. My lawyer arrived within 15 minutes, surprisingly fast given the late hour. He moved swiftly, his presence both grounding and empowering. He explained the steps in hushed tones, documented evidence, immediate separation of accounts, temporary restraining measures, all standard procedures, but they felt like armor for my bruised heart. "Do not confront her directly," he advised. "We need this airtight." He nodded. Every instinct in me screamed to yell, to throw him out, to demand answers. But restraint had never felt more vital. Hours passed in tense silence, the three of us moving carefully around the house. I stayed out of the main bedroom, out of sight but fully aware. Every whisper, every half-laugh, every glance between Aisha and him felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. I wondered fleetingly if she ever thought about me, the man who had stood by her through illness, through career changes, through family crises. Did any of that matter to her? Or had 20 years just been a convenient cage for her desires? The confrontation eventually came, but not on my terms. Aisha, sensing the shift, tried to argue, to justify, to plead. "It's not what you think," she said, though her eyes avoided mine. I could feel the anger rising, but I held it back. "Then explain," I said evenly. "Explain everything now." Her voice cracked slightly, the first genuine sign of remorse or fear. I don't know. Felt lonely. "You've been distant." The words felt hollow. Years of companionship couldn't be undone by a single confession of boredom or loneliness. I wanted to scream, to throw accusations, to reduce the house to ashes with my fury. Instead, I documented everything. Photographs, notes, a careful record of the events. My lawyer watched, nodded silently, confirming each step. By midnight, the man was gone. My wife remained, sitting tensely on the edge of the bed, finally realizing the severity of the situation. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time in the night, I saw fear, raw and unfiltered. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered, almost pleadingly. "Maybe not," I said quietly. "But you already have. And some wounds. Some betrayals. Don't just vanish with an apology." The night stretched into hours of conversation, documentation, and legal precautions. I learned things I hadn't expected. The affair had been months in the making, carefully hidden. Text messages, emails, secret meetings. Each revelation tightened the knot in my chest. I had been blind, or perhaps too trusting, too invested in the illusion of security. By dawn, I sat alone in the living room, watching the first rays of light illuminate the house. The quiet was heavy, almost suffocating. My lawyer had left, assuring me that everything was in order. My wife remained in the bedroom, likely replaying the night's events in a desperate attempt to salvage something. But I knew, with painful clarity, that the trust we had shared was fractured beyond repair. I thought about the years lost, not just tonight, but decades of compromised intimacy, of shared struggles and unspoken resentments. I thought about the life we had built and how fragile it all really was. And yet, I also felt a strange sense of liberation. The betrayal, as devastating as it was, had stripped away illusions, forcing me to confront the truth and reclaim control. When Aisha finally emerged, hours later, the conversation was muted, almost surreal. We discussed logistics, division of assets, separation of finances, all necessary, all mundane, and yet so loaded with emotional weight. I realized then that heartbreak could coexist with strategy. Grief could coexist with decisiveness. As she packed her things, I felt the familiar pang of loss, but it was accompanied by clarity. I had survived the shock, protected what was rightfully mine, and, for the first time in weeks, months, years, felt the potential for a new beginning. Before she left, she hesitated in the doorway. I'm sorry," she said softly, eyes brimming with tears. I nodded, saying nothing. Words felt inadequate. The silence carried the weight of 20 years, the weight of broken trust, the weight of a life suddenly altered. And as the door closed behind her, I let myself exhale fully for the first time. The house was empty, quiet, and for the first time in decades, it felt like mine again, not just physically but emotionally. I had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and deception. I had acted swiftly, decisively, and with a clarity that heartbreak often obscures. And in that survival, in that reclamation of self, I found the faintest glimmer of hope. A hope that one day, the wounds might heal, and the years lost might give way to a future rebuilt on honesty, resilience, and self-respect. The night had been devastating, yes, but it had also been awakening. And as the sun rose fully, casting golden light across the familiar walls, I realized something essential. Betrayal could take much, but it could never take my agency, my dignity, or my ability to rise again.